Good morning, everybody. It's my very great pleasure to be here moderating this session with one of the world's foremost AI pioneers, Dr. Jan LeCun, Chief AI Scientist at Meta. And as a slight spoiler alert to answer the question posed by this session's title, the answer will be no. That is what I anticipate this is what we'll probably be concluding. Now, interestingly, on this stage yesterday, the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, said that one of, if not the most significant moments over the last year in AI was the release of Llama 2, the open source model from Meta, and also Falcon family developed here in the UAE. So can you talk to us, Jan, about open source AI? Why is open source the way forward from a security and innovation perspective?
So there's going to be a future, not very far in the future, where all of our interaction with the digital world are going to be mediated by AI systems. We already see this with companies putting out basically replacement for search engines that are backed by AI systems. And so in this future, if all of our digital diet is mediated by AI systems, there's going to be a need for a very wide diversity of AI systems that cater to different languages, different cultures, different value systems, different centers of interest. And it can't be produced by a small number of companies on the west coast of the US or any single country. So essentially, AI tools, assistants, will become kind of a repository of all human knowledge. And it's going to be a kind of infrastructure. And the history shows that infrastructure software always ends up being open source because it's more secure, it's more customizable, it enables the creation of an ecosystem on top of it. And so the entire infrastructure of our communication systems, the internet, even our cell phones, software stack for the communicating with cell phone towers, it's all open source for very good reasons. It's not by design, it's really that the market forces that push it. So there's a similar phenomenon which is definitely happening now in the last few months that Llama 2 has been available and more open source LLMs have been available, that people are using those open source models and customizing them for vertical applications in businesses, but also training them for particular types of languages or cultures. And so it's a necessity. We need it. We need free and diverse AI platforms for the same reason that we need free and diverse press. So we don't have a single opinion coming to us from AI.
Yeah. And how do you manage the expectation of stakeholders? Obviously at Meta, I imagine there was at least one serious conversation that revolved around should we make this open source or should we not? And I'm curious, how did you manage that? Was there resistance?
Well, there was a lot of conversations over several months of whether to open source and how to do it best. And what happened is that we did it in sort of so we released the first Llama in early 2023, and it was not really open source. You had to apply to get the model and sort of give your email and promise that you were a researcher and things like this. And then we got flooded essentially with requests from startups and large companies and NGOs, all kinds of people who wanted to use Llama for commercial applications or for whatever, things that were not purely research. So to us, it felt like basically another internet, like the kind of frenzy that happened in the early and mid-90s around the internet. And clearly, this was going to be a platform. And of course, there is only a small number of companies in the world today that can train those high-power frontier models. And at Meta, there's been a long tradition of practicing open research first, but also open sourcing infrastructure software, going back to the beginning of the company. and certainly when it comes to AI, I think we've open sourced on the order of 1,000 different projects over the last 10 years. So that tells you the volume of production. Probably the most popular one is called PyTorch. It's a software platform that's almost universally used for research and development in AI. We just heard from Sam Altman, ChatGPT is built with PyTorch. And PyTorch was built at Meta and is now actually the property of the Linux Foundation. So Meta transferred the ownership because it's become too big of a thing for a single company to really manage.
I mean, getting towards the title, will AI lead us to our end? How specifically does being open source not lead us to our end? Is there something fundamental that makes it easier to secure?
Yes. So it's certainly been the case historically that open source software has been more secure, simply because there's more eyeballs on it, right? So the entire world today runs on Linux. Maybe not your desktop, but probably more than half of your phones run on Linux. Whatever is not an iPhone runs on Linux. The web servers around the world run on Linux. All the cloud services run on Linux. Your car has several microcontrollers that probably run Linux. The helicopter on Mars runs Linux. I mean, Linux runs the world. And the reason is because it's open source, so you can port it to anything you want, and you can make it more secure. And so, there's kind of a similar story to be made for AI base models. More eyeballs, more ways to make it safe, etc. Now, the only reason why you might think that it's not a good idea to open source is if you have this belief that somehow AI is so powerful that it's going to take over the world at some point. Okay, and this is not happening. So first of all, we're still very far, despite all the wonderful things that AI can do today. We're still very far from matching human and animal intelligence and learning capacities with AI systems. We're very far. It's not just around the corner. It's not going to happen in the next 2 years. We still need some scientific breakthroughs to get to the type of learning abilities that we observe in not just humans, but even your cat. Your cat has a much better understanding of the physical world than the most powerful AI systems that we have.
And you've seen my dog run into the glass door in my house. I debate that, but yeah.
Sure, but I've run into glass doors. So here is an interesting statistic. So first of all, before we get to human-level AI, we're going to need some breakthroughs that allow machines to understand how the world works, which they can't do at the moment, can remember facts, which they can't really do at the moment. They don't really have persistent memory, at least LLMs don't. They can reason and they can plan. And those are characteristics that are essential to intelligent behavior. Current large language models cannot do any of those things, at least not to the level that we'd like them to do. And the reason is relatively simple. If you look at how much data is used to train those LLMs, it sounds staggering. It's typically 10 trillion tokens, right? A token is like a word, so it's 10 to the 13, right? The one with 13 zeros, words or word equivalents. Each word or each of those tokens is stored on 2 bytes, so that's 2 10 to the 13 bytes. It seems staggering. If you evaluate how long it would take for humans to read this, it would take anywhere between 150,000 and 200,000 years for a single person to read this, reading 8 hours a day. Enormous. So the conclusion is those systems are incredibly smart, right? Because they are capable of digesting this enormous amount of knowledge. And then you talk to psychologists, and they tell you a 4-year-old child has been awake for 16,000 hours total. And you try to put a number on how much information gets into the visual cortex through vision. It's about 20 megabytes per second going through the optical nerves. So do the math, and that's 10 to the 15 bytes. In 4 years, a child has seen 50 times more data than our biggest LLM that have been trained on the entire public internet. So what that tells you is that we're never going to get to human-level intelligence or even cat-level intelligence by just training our AI systems on text. Text is a very poor source of information, very low bandwidth, and only reflects a tiny portion of human knowledge. Most of human knowledge comes from our interaction with the real world and with each other and with other entities in the world. But it doesn't come from language. And so we keep running into this paradox that roboticists have known for a long time, the Moravec paradox, or computer scientists, that things that we take for granted, like grabbing an object and manipulating it and planning a sequence of actions to arrive at a result, we don't think of this as being an intelligent task. It's kind of too easy. And that's fiendishly complicated to do for AI or for a robot. And that's the reason why we don't have self-driving cars yet, right? We have LLMs that can pass the bar exam, but we don't have self-driving cars. We don't even have domestic robots that can, clean up the dinner table, fill up the dishwasher, clean the house, mow the lawn, all those things. All tasks that a 10-year-old can learn in one shot. So that tells you we need some breakthroughs before we make real progress in AI.
Where do you think that breakthrough is going to come from?
Well, it's going to come from science. It's not going to come from just scaling up the current architectures that we have and training them on more data. First, because as we increase the amount of data with LLMs, the performance is saturating, and we don't have more data. We're already using all the public data on the internet, so that's not going to work. And so it's going to come from scientific breakthroughs, not just from more GPUs and more data. This is not sufficient. And 16,000 hours of video corresponds to about 30 minutes of YouTube uploads. So we have more video than we need to be able to, if we had the techniques to get a system to learn how the world works by watching, like babies. For example, it takes about 9 months for babies to learn about intuitive physics, the fact that objects that are not supported fall because of gravity. Before that, babies haven't really kind of understood that. And what type of learning do they use? That's really kind of a big puzzle. We're working on it. We're making progress, but it's going to take a while.
You speak to a lot of business leaders, a lot of government representatives around the world. I'm curious to get your perspective on how the rhetoric has changed over the last year, let's say, particularly as it relates to the security and the safety concerns associated with generative AI in particular. How has that evolved, and where are the concerns currently coming from?
Yeah, so there is good news and bad news in that respect. Some of us certainly have a very positive view of the potential of technology. We just heard from Sam Altman. We wouldn't be working on this if we didn't think that was beneficial for humanity. And in fact, my opinion is that AI systems will essentially amplify intelligence of humanity as a whole. We'll have AI assistant working for us. They're not going to take over the world because they'll be working for us. We'll be setting goals for them. AI might be dangerous if it sets its own goals, but if we set their goals, then they just work for us. It's like having a staff of really smart people working for you, which I think most of the leaders in this room are familiar with the concept. I think of working with people who are smarter than them. Certainly I am. So we shouldn't feel threatened by this. And I think more and more people are realizing that this could bring a new renaissance to humanity, basically, by, similar to what happened in the 15th century with the invention of the printing press, which really allowed the dissemination of knowledge. So it's a bit of the same effect. So what I've observed over the last 6 months, roughly, is there was a lot of noise around existential risk, and a lot of discussions about this. And those have somewhat been more muted over the last 2 months or so. And now people are more interested in, like, how do we do it right? So, I think it's very similar to a lot of technologies that have been developed over the last century or so, where the first models were perhaps not very reliable and safe, and eventually, because of good engineering and market forces and everything, they became reliable. Probably came here through long flights on twin-engine airplanes. Turbojets have become incredibly reliable because of careful engineering over decades. But that wasn't the case early on. It's going to be the same for AI. We're going to start with, not so powerful AI systems, but still systems that are capable of understanding the world, planning, remembering, reasoning, maybe at the level of a cat. And then we're going to progressively turn on, increase the level of sophistication of those systems, all the while kind of implementing guardrails to keep those systems under control, basically fulfilling our objectives and working for us.
And to pick up on the comparison to the jets there, you are right, the jet technology is very safe, but every now and again, as we've seen recently, a door on a plane will blow out mid-flight and causes everyone quite a great degree of alarm. And I suppose the question is, how do we avoid that equivalent happening with AI? We didn't expect that. You might expect an engine failure, but you don't expect the door to fall off a plane while it's in midair. So, is there confidence that the equivalent of that isn't being posed here?
Well, so, every powerful technology comes with risks. And that, despite the fact that commercial flights are unbelievably safe in terms of statistics, mishaps happen, as with every technology. They're incredibly safer than cars, and people drive cars, right, everywhere. So it's going to be the same for AI. There's going to be, good ways to deploy AI, bad ways to deploy AI. We're going to learn as we go, the way we've learned how to make cars safer, with seat belts and crumple zones and bumpers and automatic braking systems and things like that. So there's going to be this process. But I think what caused people alarm is the idea that comes out of science fiction that somehow if you get it wrong once, humanity is doomed. And that scenario is just preposterous.
It's a big year for elections around the world. Do you think, are we prepared? Have we done enough? So
sadly, no. That's a real short-term risk. This is not particularly attached to sophisticated AI, by the way, because the ability to produce, fake content, images, or even video has been around for a while. The ability of generative AI to do this on a big scale is scaring a number of people because of elections across the world in the coming year. Now, what the industry has been working on is standards to authenticate or to essentially label authentic content. So this requires the buy-in from camera manufacturers, image manipulation software providers, distribution channels like social networks. And so the entire industry basically sort of agreed on a standard called C2PA, which would propagate sort of marks of authenticity, if you want. Simultaneously, some companies, social networks in particular, Meta in particular, sort of watermarks generated content. Now, the thing is, it's better to watermark and authenticate real content than generated content, because journalists have an incentive. People who actually want to disseminate true information have an incentive to preserve that mark, whereas people who want to just disinform don't have any incentive. So it's probably a better idea to mark authentic content.
So trust your journalists. As a journalist, I'm very pleased to hear that. That's excellent. We're at the risk of running out of time here, but just in a final word, if there's sort of one piece of advice you would give people out here who want to take something away from this to make sure their AI systems are robust and will not lead to the end of us all, what would that be?
Well, so the short story is open source based models are a necessity and will happen regardless of what governments think they should do. And so a good recommendation for governments around the world is do not legislate open source AI out of existence.
Dr. Jan LeCun, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.